So these particular units that we are going to study, which are theoretical, so two parts to the course. One is theoretical units, one is practical units. So theoretical units that we're going to study, we are going to look at asking you to do a bit of tutorial with us. Once these tutorials are done, then what we are going to do is ask you to do a bit of reading, which is to go through presentations and slides. So if I take you back to the unit specification, now, when we look at any particular unit, any unit that you study with us, we are going to look at the unit being divided into learning outcomes. So when you look at learning outcome, which is here, there is one learning outcome, which is one presentation. Then you have learning outcome 2, which is the second presentation. Depending on the number of learning outcomes in the books, in the units, you'll have that many presentations available on Moodle. So you have learning outcome 3, which is LO3 and third presentation, then we have 4, and then we have 5. So this unit in particular has 5 learning outcomes. So essentially, we'll be looking at tutorials to cover these so that you have a good idea in terms of what is required to be studied in terms of cybersecurity. Now, what is being taught would be actually covered from the indicative content here. So learning outcome 1, all this content we need to look at coverage in terms of discussing this particular unit. Learning outcome 2 would be this content, so on, and we have 3, 4, and 5. So all the presentations and the material that we have is basically based around all this content which has been given as a suggestive study part to cover this particular unit. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So essentially, when we look at, I just can't teach you just generic things about cybersecurity. So when we say understand the use of cybersecurity, and then there are some assessment criteria, pass, merit, and distinction, they have content which is given here. So if you see 1 bullet point, 2 bullet point, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet points, and that will correspond to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet points here, which is what all we will cover in learning outcome 1. Similarly, learning outcome 2. Now, today's discussion is going to be focused on understanding the use of cybersecurity. And in this, there are 5 assessment criteria in pass, 1 merit and 1 distinction. Merit and distinction will always be an extension of this, either of these tasks. Here, you are required to basically look at going into a bit more depth or detail by talking or doing analysis or comparison or talking about, I would say, comparing and contrasting with the use of an example. So they would not be new tasks, but here the idea would be to try and go into deeper details of something which has been talked about in the past assessment criteria. And they would ask you to either show an application or talk with an example to show how this particular thing as an example would be working. So we'll be looking at discussing each of these assessment criteria individually, and they will be followed by discussions on the merit and distinction task. Now, merit and distinction is not always there in all the tasks, because in the unit, you'll have 2 or 3 opportunities to hit merit grade, and you'll have 1 or 2 opportunities to hit distinction grade. So these are generally extension activities which are predominantly given in the assignment brief to help you also show what you have learned theoretically, like frameworks, key concepts, models, and then show their application in merit. And in the case of distinction, they will involve you to cover not just the theoretical part, show the application, but also create an example to confirm your understanding. And if you're able to do so, and you have to meet all the merit and all the distinction criteria, then you would be able to get a higher grade, which is depending on how many tasks you actually attempted. So we'll cover this in a separate discussion, which is in the assignment discussion after we have completed the entire unit. So today we are going to focus on this learning outcome. And for this, what we're going to do is look at a presentation and a few slides, which will essentially help us in terms of, knowing how you're going to be looking at studying these concepts and fundamentals with regards to, cybersecurity. So in the meanwhile, while we are discussing, and in the meanwhile, if you have any questions at any given point in time, feel free to obviously ask so that I can give you more details or share that with the help of examples. Now, overall, when we look at why do we want to study cybersecurity as a unit, I think the overall aim here from the perspective of studying this particular unit is to understand how do we keep ourselves, our data, and anything related to the data or information that you have safe online. And when I say, safe online, what we essentially mean is that anything that is, for example, people will have things like photographs, you might have some essential personal documents, you might have information in the form of documents, which could be something that you feel is, which is more important and beneficial for you. Sometimes people store things like documents which include their personal documents, maybe their will, details about their bank account, or details about their family and family members, or photographs and things like that. They all would constitute what is called, data or information. And when you want to keep it safe, you don't want it to be accessible to anyone apart from yourself or people that you have given permission to. That would involve keeping and using the concept of what is called cybersecurity. Now, in general, as I mentioned earlier, cyber and security, if you look at, these are two words which have come out of the context of when things have started to reside on the internet. That means you have data residing on the internet in the form of either in cloud or in data warehouse or data servers. And this is something that you access remotely. And in such cases, what you want to do is make sure you are able to protect that data. And that protection of data can be done on computer systems, networks, and the protection essentially, or the security, is around how do you prevent this unauthorized access of data, information, and any sort of disruption which can happen for you to be able to access that data. When sometimes when you see servers are down, or when network is down, or your internet is down, it could be because somebody somewhere has been able to get unauthorized access to the network or certain part of the equipment, hardware, and that has led to that particular disruption. So when we look at a simple example that I would do is, how do you look at preventing cybersecurity attacks on your PC or on your computer? You look at installing what is called a antivirus software. And in some cases, on Windows, you would see the latest version of Windows, there is a software which is built in called the Windows Defender. And when you look at Macs or some of the other type of equipment in terms of software, they will have some sort of a firewall built in into the operating system that would act as a deterrent, or as a hurdle for people to be able to gain access to your PC or your information. And when you look at these kind of software which prevent unauthorized access, used, disclosure, disruption, or modification of data and information which is stored online or on your hard drive on your PC, then they will all be related to the concept of something called cybersecurity. Now, your understanding and learning in this particular unit is to know about the basics of what is security, what is risk assessment, how do you reduce the risk of this data information getting into the hands of people who do not have access to it, is all what is going to be covered in this particular unit. Now, in terms of the indicative content, there's a fair amount of indicative content that we need to look at, but our discussions are primarily going to be around three areas. How do you protect yourself? First, the government creates legislation and acts, and these acts and legislations generally are implemented globally. They might vary from country to country, but generally what will happen is these kind of acts are also now in existence in most countries in the same shape or form as they have been designed or created in the Western world. So we will be looking at some of the acts and legislations which actually allow the government to implement standard guidelines which every company, organization, or semi-government organization follows in order to protect data. Then we'll also be looking at how do you prevent these kind of attacks which can happen, which are people or hackers or unauthorized use of data which people are trying to get access to. We look at some journal platforms in which this can happen, and how do we restrict or save ourselves in terms of changing some of the settings, or maybe employing certain softwares to be able to prevent those attacks to happen. We'll also look at different forms of techniques which hackers or people use to get access to this particular data. So things like, viruses is something that we've heard about, but with increasing use of Java and HTML, and when we look at HTML5 and Flash, for example, which is now discontinued by Adobe, but when you look at the way how some of these attacks can actually be initiated, they typically happen through what are called malicious programs. Now, these programs can be termed as viruses, Trojan horses, bots, malware, spyware, or I would say spam mails. And these kind of programs which are written can essentially trick you or a user essentially to click on certain things which you are not meant to, and they trick you by executing a program in the background. And when this execution of program happens in the background, they are able to run a code or some sort of a programming code which has been designed to give some sort of remote access to the PC or the device that you're using. So when you look at Apple in particular, Apple has a very closed operating system. They have made a software development kit available to developers, but the core part of the operating system has not been opened up. When you look at Windows, that is pretty much the same, but over the years, Microsoft obviously has created SDKs, and some part and parcel of the modules integrated into the operating system have been made available for API and software development. And in such cases, you generally see that Windows-based PCs can have or can get infected by malicious programs like viruses, Trojan horses, or bots. And in such cases, your information can actually get leaked online or get in the access of different hands and get access, or people can get unauthorized access to that information. So we'll go into a bit of detail on that and understand how these things can be controlled, can be limited, and in some cases, how these can be used in a way wherein it helps us prevent people getting access to that data. And then what we also want to do in the first learning outcome is to understand what are the types of cyber attacks. So one of the things is that as a generic layman user, or as somebody who's not aware of what is cybersecurity and what are cybersecurity attacks, we need to, one is because I'm a novice and I have no knowledge, I would say, okay, my PC was attacked, or I had a cyber attack, or there was something which executed on my PC, and that basically meant that people got access to some of my data and information. But when you are going into a bit of detail, what we want to be able to understand is what is a cyber attack and what are the different types of attacks which can happen. So there is some information which is what we are going to cover in this learning outcome, which talks about the different types of cyber attack and how they can be used to affect, or in this case, we use the word infect a PC hardware or a system, and they would be the 5 or 6 types that we will be looking at in one of the assessment criteria. So things like DOS attack, which is called the denial of service. Sometimes what happens is, a typical example of this is that when you're trying to log on to the website servers are not responding. So it will say server not found, or it will say a 404 error, which is like the web page not found. And that is primarily a denial of service attack. That means hackers in this case actually would deny you to be able to log into a particular site to gain access to information. This typically happens on websites which you are going to log on to, things like your bank website, or you look at, for example, any website that you go on to for the purposes of purchasing something or subscribing to a service. In such cases, you would see denial of service attack, being made available on that website. A typical example in the UK tends to be when you look at going to your surgery's website and you want to book an online appointment. What sometimes has happened in the past is that the NHS computer system has been hacked, and what it does is when the hackers get access to this, they do a denial of service attack, which means they do not allow you to access the website itself to be able to make an appointment, and that would be an example of DOS attack. And then you have man in the middle attack, which we'll go into a bit of detail. Phishing attacks we are all aware of. We look at malware, which can infect your PC or your device. You have the SQL injection attack, which is more or less related to corrupting your database in the background. So when you look at interactive websites like wherein you're buying something or you're making a payment, then in such cases, if your database connection gets severed, what the hackers would be trying to do is get hold of your information related to your debit credit card, and that would be used to make unauthorized purchases. And in such cases, you would normally have a SQL injection attack. And then you have a password attack. Sometimes what you generally see is that you're not able to log into your website or not able to log into your email because somebody has got into your account, and what they've done is they've gone in, executed a program, and actually got hold of your email and changed the password. So in such cases, you would typically have, a password attack. So we'll go into one of the all these types of different types of cyber attacks, which we generally get to see, and they are characterized on the basis of how it happens, what services or what part of the services they can affect, and how it is done in order to ensure that that service is not available, allows us to classify those kind of attacks. Now, let's look at one or two things which we want to look at as a simple example of where and how do you prevent a cyber security attack. I think a couple of years back, one of the main examples that I would give is that the Apple iCloud service had got hacked, and a lot of celebrity photos, their own data and everything had got stolen. So after that, what you would generally see, and I think that happened about 7 or 8 years back, at that point in time, most organizations took into account implementing what is called the 2FA, two-factor authentication. And two-factor authentication is a way to secure information, because when somebody tries to log in, the 2FA will allow them, basically require them to send a text message out. And in some cases, it will also trigger an email. And nowadays, what we also use is the Authenticator app. So for example, you have the Google Authenticator app, which will allow you to create a barcode, scan a barcode, and that allows the app to generate what is called a 6-digit password. And that then allows you to log into the account. So even if somebody gets hold of your email, but if you've enabled what is called the two-factor authentication, then that would trigger either a text message, email, or it will ask you to look at using an authenticator app to generate a 6-digit code. And that would then, once that is put in, that would then allow you to log into your account. So in order to deter and reduce these kind of attacks which are happening, what has happened is that one of the things which has been started and standardized in the industry is that specifically for accounts which involve you requiring to log in, securing, for example, bank transactions or e-commerce related transactions on the website, most companies have now implemented what is called two-factor authentication. And this is one of the clearest way to deter or remove any sort of attack which could happen in terms of people trying to get hold of your sensitive information. And that could be an example of how to prevent, I would say, cybersecurity attack. So one of the things that we are all learning and seeing is that what you get to see that cryptocurrency is coming in. Now, one of the reasons why cryptocurrency is coming in, or somebody created cryptocurrency, as a tool, is because banks and bank-related transactions can get hacked. But over the years, what has happened is that people have started to devise an electronic, I would say, wallet, and that electronic wallet or currency essentially, which can create multiple copies of ledger when a transaction happens, and they can be stored on all the PCs. so that the transaction is authenticated, typically is one of the systems which is being trialed out in order to ensure that fraud online can be reduced, specifically fraud related to money transactions or e-commerce transactions. And that is one of the reasons why they are trying to build a system which will allow users, or basically it'll make it absolutely impossible for hackers to be able to get access to any account and carry out financial transactions without they being authorized, through a system which is called cryptocurrency. So these are things which are coming up in this space, and there are obviously hurdles which cryptocurrency is currently facing, because the banks, traditional banks, do not want to allow, because that would mean that there will be actually no physical money, but transactions which will happen in the form of what is called a cryptocurrency, which is like a digital currency which will be used to carry out transactions. So nowadays, if you see over the years, what has happened is that the use of actual money has reduced, because people are using debit cards, they are using NFC or near field communication for things like Apple Pay, Android Pay, Google Pay. And this is limiting the use of physical money, which is happening in the world right now. And more or less, because every location, every place that you go and shop, or every transaction you try and do, there is always a credit card machine or some sort of a machine which is coming in handy. And in such cases, slowly and gradually, as you're saying, the usage of physical currency is reducing, and more transactions are happening online, because these transactions are more secure. They are 128-bit. They have encryption, which is, it used to be 64-bit, now it is 128-bit encryption, and that makes the transaction secure. So these are all things that you're going to be looking at, understanding within cybersecurity. Now, one of the videos that I put in onto the website is from a website called Tech Target, and they write a lot of technical articles. I put a link to this video here, which obviously I am not going to, play, but I would suggest that you look at this particular video, because it gives you a very good overview in 2 minutes, and I think 2.5 minutes, about the concept of cybersecurity and why do we need it in general. This is, going to be very, very important, because it will give you a very good idea in terms of why this concept came about, where it originated, and why this is more important in today's current context when we look at things online. One of the things that we are doing currently right now is I'm doing a webinar, and you are able to attend sitting in the comforts of your own room. This is using technology. But when we are using Zoom, I have not opened the webinar up, so nobody else can join. Only people with code and a passcode or a meeting code would be able to log into this particular meeting. And the reason why that has been done is to create this webinar as a closed group webinar, which means that only people having either being invited or have authorized access to it can actually gain access to this particular webinar for the purposes of joining the course session. Although I would say if I go back 10 years, there were softwares available that we were using. And when you were broadcasting online, if people had access to the IP address or the link to join, they were able to join straight away, and there was no password protection or the way to block those users having to join it. But over the years, as security has improved, and as I'm not the only one who's using Zoom right now. Zoom as a platform might be hosting 1 million sessions worldwide today, and people might be Zooming and doing these webinars. But why does my webinar not get entangled with somebody else maybe having a webinar in America? Is because that is how it has been channeled by usage of subscription, by accounts, and by passwords and passcodes to the meeting, so that even in the digital world, in the cyber world, it is able to clearly differentiate that there are different servers, different users, different licenses, and different time zones in which these webinars are all happening electronically. And that is because of the way the systems have been configured in order to provide security, when a webinar is being run by a set of users. Now, the first assessment criteria. So any questions up until now? Right. Now, the first assessment criteria that we have on the in the learning outcome is it talks about explaining the importance of cybersecurity. Now, when you look at explaining the importance of cybersecurity, you would need to know that why cybersecurity has become, important in the context of modern world, specifically because we have lots of devices currently being used. So, if you think, what device do you use? I use a mobile. Sometimes I use a tablet or an iPad. I use a Mac, and you use a phone, and you're also sometimes when you're in the office, you're using a PC or a Mac. So there are 4 or 5 different types of devices that you're using. Now, we also see that some of us have Netflix, Disney subscription, or Amazon Prime subscription, and these are also now available on smart TVs. So you're also able to access the internet on a smart TV, like an LG or a Samsung or a Sony smart TV or other brands as well. Now, when you access this information online, what you're basically looking at is that this part of the information that you access online can also sometimes be accessed by cyber criminals, which means that they can use loopholes in technology to be able to exploit some of the vulnerabilities. Now, give you a practical example here before we get into this discussion for learning outcome 1 assessment criteria 1.1. Why do we, when you buy a router at home, for example, you have internet and you buy a router at home, why do you keep a password on your Wi-Fi network? And why is it advised that you keep changing your net passwords every, a few months in order to ensure that if you have given the access to your network to somebody, like, for example, a few guests have come in to meet up with you in your house and they wanted to get access to the internet, you have given your Wi-Fi password to them. But normally it is recommended that you change it a few months down the line. Now, the reason why that happens is because Wi-Fi, which is wireless fidelity, as a network, can also be used to get access to a network when they have the key. The password is your key. And when somebody gets hold of the key for that Wi-Fi network, they can actually get into the network. Now, the network in your house might have a lot of devices connected. You could have your phone connected, your PC connected. A lot of people today have devices like smart bell, smart bells, cameras, smart monitors and TVs and other things connected. Now, if somebody gets access to your Wi-Fi network, what they would be able to do is essentially look at devices or use those devices to, I would say, gain unauthorized access to it. Sometimes you would see there are video feeds which can get leaked, because if in your house you have a video camera and that is on a Wi-Fi network, and if your Wi-Fi isn't very secure, then people can get access to that network and they can get to work that camera and take that feed without you even knowing that the camera is on. And this is something that you are advised that when you go to hotels, please scan for cameras, because there might be hidden cameras in the room. Now, why is this done? Is because people are trying to get unauthorized access to footage. And in such cases, these vulnerabilities can be exploited through the wireless network. And that if you don't have a secure password or you don't have a encryption enabled on the network, then people can get access to it. And with that access of the network, they can get access to devices in your home, and they could be used to listen into a conversation that you're having, because the TV has a microphone, smart TV has a microphone, and it also has a camera. And when the TV is on, your camera and your microphone can be tuned or hacked to listen into the conversations that you're having at home. So it is quite important to understand that we need to be able to secure our devices, our information, and that is where the concept of this whole thing that we are talking about today, which is cybersecurity, comes in. So as technology continues to advance, what we are seeing is that there are vulnerabilities which can be exploited by hacking into or gaining access to these devices and networks, and that could mean that your sensitive information could be falling into the wrong hands, because it is all possible now to do so because of the use of technology. So why is cybersecurity important? Couple of things which come to my mind if I don't look at this slide and I look at why is it important. One is I want to look at protecting my data. You know, a lot of us today scan lots of things. A lot of our photos are on our phones. We keep our photos on our phone, documents, online because it's easier to access. You might have your electricity bill, your council tax bill, your passport scan. All those could be on the phone or some sort of a device online, whether it's your Gmail, Hotmail, Outlook, whatever you have. We have lots of information on it. Now, what happens if I get hold of that information? For example, you have your bank information available online, which you have stored on a document, and it's on your Gmail. How does it help me why does it help me to get hold of that information? Now, with that information, if I get your bank account sort code and I know how you log in online, then I can log in from anywhere in the world and transfer money or take away your money from the bank account. Now, if you have not enabled two-factor authentication, you might not even get a text message. You might not be even required to authorize it. And because I'm just using simple username and password, I might be able to get into the account and empty that account without you even knowing it. So one of the things that you want to look at why cybersecurity is important is that you want to protect sensitive data. Now, when it comes to money transactions or related to e-commerce transaction, you also want to look at preventing any sort of financial loss. And this financial loss essentially could be because if people commit, and how easy it is. Let's look at this. If I know somebody's PayPal ID or ID, which is like if you do shopping on eBay as an e-commerce platform, and that e-commerce platform, you enabled your PayPal address or a Stripe address or any sort of a address to be able to email address, which can be used, and in turn that email address is connected to your bank account. So how does PayPal work? PayPal works wherein you put an email address, that email is connected to your bank in the background with your card or details. And if somebody has your PayPal details, they can actually log in to the account, trick the account by saying that, okay, it's Shaima logging in or Skirtha logging in. And once they've logged in, they can buy things online using PayPal as a option, as a credit option. So in such cases, when you look at Alipay, which is in China for Alibaba.com, you have eBay, you have lots of these websites which use proprietary payment systems. If your email gets into the wrong hand and they know what email is associated for the purchase, for the reasons of when you buy or purchase, then this can lead to financial fraud or losses. Now, you might also want to look at, assuming why cybersecurity is important, is you might also want to look at things like maintaining trust and reputation. Now, one of the things that you would look at is when you go to any particular website, these websites, they advertise on the footer down below in the footer of the website. Let me show you one. They would say, for example, highlight things which are related to this website is protected by such and such, or this website has 128-bit encryption. Now, the reason why this is done is because it is going to try and ensure that the customers which are shopping on their website are actually looking at, knowing that the website has encryption, some sort of software, firewall running in the background, which protects any sensitive information being stored online or being cached online on the browser. So in this case, if I look at a banking website, as you can see, it is protected through FSCS, and that basically is a protection which allows any activity happening on the website to be tracked. And that essential part of it would mean that you are you feel confident that as a consumer, as a customer, I'm actually on a site which is following certain standards for security. Now, if I look at, say, for example, any other website like eBay, you'd also see that the websites would typically put things like, one, they ask you to accept a cookie, but apart from that, what they are also going to put in terms of the details on the website are in terms of how the website is constructed, why the website has this protection, why the website has that protection. And that would give you confidence again to say that if I buy something on this site, or if I go and buy things online on this particular site, my details on card details and my personal details are going to be stored safely and dealt with, in a very professional and I would say, let's say, very professional manner. That means they will understand that these bits of information about me browsing the website, buying something on the website is information and data which is confidential, and they would maintain that particular confidentiality by not selling that data onto somebody else or making that data available to third parties. So in such cases, you would generally see that these websites are sites which are going to employ what are called certain types of software which make them quite secure. Now, let me also give you one particular example. Just give me 1 second. I want to look at one particular short example of. So one of the things that you would generally see is what is called Cyber Essentials. Now, this is a standard which has been essentially created by the National Cybersecurity Center in the UK, which is a government website. And what they've done is they've created a standard called Cyber Essentials. Now, any website which basically shows this particular logo would mean that the website is developed using certain standards. And these standards tend to be backed by the government certification scheme on ensuring that the data collected by a website, when you accept a particular cookie on the website, which collects a lot of information from your browser, those websites and the collection of data is going to be very secure and is going to obviously conform to certain standards which have been created by the National Cyber Security Center. So this logo that you see, Cyber Essentials logo, is going to be available on websites which will essentially give you a peace of mind. And again, any company, any organization implementing this particular logo would be conforming to certain rules, regulations, and standards which have actually been set by the National Cybersecurity Center. So these are examples of why you would want your data to be kept secure online. And that is one of the reasons why cybersecurity is going to be, very important in terms of keeping your information and your data safe. Now, a couple of years back, if you remember, in 2016, the European Union implemented what is called the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation Act. Now, in the UK, we had a Data Protection Act of 1998, and this was revised in 2016 with the inclusion of what is called GDPR. That means, what were the changes which was brought in? The European Union said that if data of European Union or people or citizens of Europe has to be kept, then the servers have to be within Europe. The servers cannot be in Russia, cannot be in US, cannot be in Asia. They have to have the information residing on servers within the region, which is European region. Now, obviously GDPR is an extensive act, but the main part of the act was that if information was leaked or is not leaked, let's put it this way, if the information was being collected, stored, and retrieved, then the data and the way the information was supposed to be stored is to be done within the European Union. So if I live in the UK and I browse lots of websites, my data is being collected in the background by cookies and by web browsers. That data has to be stored within the European Union. It can be stored in Greece, in France, in Germany, in UK, Italy, but it has to be residing in the servers within Europe only. It cannot be residing outside in terms of countries outside Europe. So in such cases, it was made mandatory that information has to be stored of European citizens or citizens of Europe within the data servers within Europe itself. The second point was that in larger organizations, when you collect data, you have to declare why this data is being collected, right? Are you going to sell it to third parties? Are you going to use it for marketing purposes? Are you going to use it for any other purposes? Then the declaration of this has to be provided in the terms and condition or privacy terms on the website. Now, again, if I give you a simple example by sharing a screen, this is something which every website, every organization has to comply with. So if I look at this website right now, and I open, say, for example, our own college website, you would generally see that if you're coming onto the site for the first time, there would be some sort of some sort of a disclaimer which will come and will ask you to accept what are called cookies on the website. Let me try and see if I can get another website, and you generally see, here you go. So here, this notice has to be served, because this website from, say, Royal Bank of Scotland is going to be actually collecting data, and this data that they are collecting essentially could be used for very different reasons. Now, if you need to read, you can go into the cookie policy and click on it, and it'll show you the details of what data they are collecting, where the data is going to be stored, how this data is going to be used, and for how long this data is going to be kept. Now, this is something which is covered in the GDPR Act. So every website has to have this. They need to clearly differentiate, define how this data can be stored, collected, and retrieved. How long will this be stored, and what is the purpose of storing or collecting this data? Now, in the UK, obviously, this data can be collected and can be stored for a period of up to 6 years. And if I don't want this data to be stored, I can write to the organization, or what is called the DPO, Data Protection Officer, to say that, could you remove my details from your website? And this is something which was given as a right to the consumer, because then in such cases, when you log on to a particular website and you don't want them to use it for marketing or other purposes, then in such cases, you have the right to be able to write to that organization and say, please, could you remove my details and not have this for the use, for marketing purposes. So GDPR and legislation in general are ways through which, data can be protected and collection of data can be restricted. In some cases, you can also look at collection of this data to be minimized. So for example, when you log on to websites, it'll collect functional data, it will collect technical data, it will collect different types of data, and you can actually restrict that to just the basic type of data, which is essential bits that the website needs to look at so that they can give you the full experience of browsing that particular website. And again, this is something that you can look at as an example, but these are the 7 main parts of the GDPR Act, which actually help protect consumer information or your information from a consumer's perspective. Now, there are some other acts that you can look at studying. One is the Harassment Act of 1997, which is basically ensuring that the fair conduct can be done. And if a website or if an organization wants to collect data beyond what the user is wanting to allow, then in such cases that can be treated as harassment, and you could write to the government agencies under this particular act, and that could be looking at restricting people to get access to you or get access to your information either at your workplace or at your home or even online. There is a Communication Act 2003, which is something which was introduced predominantly for telecom and broadcasting, organizations. And there was a creation of a new semi-government agency called Ofcom, which is Office of Communication. And this particular agency looks after, legislation or regulation in the field of Wi-Fi, in terms of broadcast, in terms of television, and also relates. There's another agency called Advertising Service Agency, ASA, which looks at that when ads and other bits conform and they are being, transmitted on over the air or on television, they are basically, providing actual and factual information. They are not misleading the public or members of public in terms of giving wrong information. And that is controlled under the Communication Act. Now, in general, there are lots of elements of cybersecurity, and it is important to also look at business continuity. It is also to look at legal requirements. It is also to look at protecting from any future threats which can arise, and also looking at, in some cases, when I look at if somebody is to get access to the NHS computer system and that is unauthorized access, then it could be a matter of national security. Because if I think in 2017 or 2019, the NHS computer system was hacked and it went down, and that led to the cancellation of 257,000 appointments on that day. A lot of operations had to be cancelled and put off because the computer systems weren't working, and in those cases, it was a hacking operation which had brought the system down for about 2 or 3 days. So in such cases, if these kind of large incidents happen, then they are treated as what are called threats to national security. And in such cases, cybersecurity and implementation of cybersecurity becomes very important, because they will lead to large-scale disruption of, activities related to things which are happening online. Imagine if you were traveling from London to Manchester on the train, and today most of the network, the train signals and the way trains operate and the timetabling and scheduling is done, it's all done online, and then it's fed through the system through which some of these things run. Now, if the train system or the train network is hacked, or say, for example, when you look at, in general, the road network, which has lots of security cameras, and then we've seen this in movies like Ocean's 11 and things like that. When they get hacked, hackers can get access to changing the street lights, signals, and diverting things, stopping things, and they then become what are called threats to national security, because it can lead to chaos or it can lead to a lot of confusion. And that is where the reason why cybersecurity becomes important. So the government website today, when you look at hmrc.gov website, they're all online. Now, if there is an attack on the website, to disable it, to get or prevent access to that website for consumers like you and me, then in such cases, it will be seen as a national security threat. And then the government would implement things and guidelines related to cybersecurity. And that would be looking at preventing such future attacks happening such kind of attacks happening in the future. So that is why cybersecurity will be very important. Is that understood?
Yeah.
Any questions?
Mm,
Okay,
no.
now let's look at quickly some of the assessment criteria, other assessment criteria. Now, one of them talks about describe how do you keep up to date with security attacks, right? This is something that we need to understand when we look at, let's say, why do attacks happen, and how do we keep ourselves up to date with these attacks, which can originate from certain geographies. Now, we know that some of these attacks typically tend to happen from China, from Russia, from North Korea, and there are some hubs in the world which is called the dark internet or dark side of the web, wherein some of these attacks can actually originate. And the reason why agencies in the UK and abroad in other countries also keep track of these sites is because they want to know and understand that where these attacks are originating from, and what and how are these attacks actually going to evolve. So, for example, some of the attacks generally happen from hidden IP addresses, internet addresses. We have a postal address at home, and you have a door number, you have a postcode. Similarly, on the internet, there are what are called IP addresses or internet addresses. Now, some of these addresses typically can be hidden under VPN or virtual private networks, and then can be used to do this malicious activity. So how do we keep ourselves up to date with these new security attacks? Number one, the National Cybersecurity Center puts out weekly updates, monthly updates to say, and these are put out through the use of what are called cybersecurity newsletters and blogs. And what they do is they also regularly publish new guidelines and threats which are going to be emerging because of vulnerabilities which are discovered within networks or in institutions. These could be, for example, the dark side of the internet, the hacker news. You have a website called ZDNet. I don't know whether you've heard of that, but ZDNet is a website. If you open that website up, you generally see that ZDNet is a website which provides security updates, related to cyber attacks, or related to basically digital side of things, innovative side of things, which is technology and how things are evolving because of technology. So if I show you this particular website, so these are bits that you would look at in terms of keeping yourself up to date with any sort of attacks which are happening. It's called ZDNet Securities. When I click on this particular website actually puts out lots and lots of information related to attacks or security attacks or sites which are seen to be vulnerable from which the attacks are originating. Now, just as an example, I've opened this website up after a number of years. You would generally see there's a big notice for privacy which comes up, which basically complies and serves you the GDPR regulations. You can reject this particular notice, and in some cases, the websites then ask you to, the browser closes because you're not accepting the basic essentials of what information they want to actually capture. So they don't allow you to even browse the website. But you can also interrogate by finding out what is the purpose of you collecting data. And when you click on show purpose, look at the kind of information the website is collecting. So one are strictly necessary cookies, which is a part and parcel of the cybersecurity essentials that any website that you go and browse, wherever you are browsing from, unless you're in an incognito mode or hidden mode, your data, some basic data would be collected, like the IP address, the PC type, the operating system type. Those would be still collected by the site that you're visiting. But apart from that, there are performance related things which are collected for your website. There are targeting cookies which are going to be related to marketing. Then social media in general, you would look at how the information is going to be stored and accessed. This website will actually store and access your information and also make it available to 708 different marketing partners. That means I think this is something you would have seen, that what happens is sometimes you go to a website and you click OK and you select and you start browsing. But a couple of days down the line, what you will see is that I'm getting an email for buying a knife, or buying, say, for example, a cookie, or buying something about, a cloth or something like that. And you say, hang on, how am I starting to get all these emails when I've not even visited these sites? Now, this is happening because when you go to a site, and sometimes some of these sites collect information and they also share this information with other marketing partners. So 708 of these companies would get your email address, because if I'm signed into my browser, I have a profile, my name, my email address, and whatever information that you've put out in the open would actually be captured by the cookie or the browser, and that information would get relayed to the company. Now, that information then at a later stage would be, because you've agreed to this. As of now, it's switched off. If I agree to this, that means they would be open to sharing this information, which will include things like login-based identifiers. Then it will include network-based identifiers. It will include things like browser type, information, language, screen size, and what operating system you are on. And these kind of information would then be available to these vendors. Now, if you want to see, it is now under the GDPR Act, they have to declare who are going to be these vendors. When I click on the list, it will show me a list of these vendors to which the information is going to be, shared with. 708 of these vendors, like Csmio, Smarto, PlusPoint, Genius Sport. These are companies which are trying to collect email addresses of users from different sites so that they can do email marketing. And as you would see, LiveRamp, Group M UK Limited, 15 Technology, these are all companies which are going to get access to that data. So if you do not want this to happen, obviously you have the ability as a user under the national cybersecurity rules to be able to reject. So I can reject all, and my data is not going to be sent across to these companies or captured here on the website. So in general, going back, what I wanted to show was basically this related to that when you look at how do you keep yourself up to date with the cybersecurity attacks, you look at following certain websites, you follow the National Cybersecurity Center and the news alerts that it puts out. You also look at, subscribing to certain websites, which will allow you to get hold of latest information about these kind of threats which can originate. And these are some of the sites that I would suggest that you could subscribe to get hold of information related to new security attacks which are developing, happening around the world. So you have the National Cybersecurity Center, which is the number one site, which is a government site. But obviously on BBC, Guardian Online, Telegraph, and Bloomberg, you have dedicated, columns which will provide you that information. There are certain technology sites, and then obviously companies which are developing antivirus software, malware, hacking, or other kind of softwares which will prevent these attacks to happen. These sites would also be providing, updates related to security. Is that okay? Any questions on this so far?
No, it's clear.
Okay. The next one that we are looking at is describe the typical mindset of hackers. So this is a question that I want to look at understanding from a point of view that, okay, what goes through the mind when people think of doing ethical hacking or unethical hacking? There is a concept called ethical hacking and there's a concept called unethical hacking. Now, you would see that these big companies like Apple, Facebook, Microsoft also employ hackers, people who are very good programmers, and they are employed by these companies to crack their codes and crack their programs to see if they have any vulnerabilities. And that part, which is basically when they employ them on their payroll or otherwise as a consultant and say, could you find loopholes or gap holes in our software, and they would then try to break the software and the code and get into it. They would then be looking at doing what is called ethical hacking, because this is being done to improve customer experience. This is being done to remove any such vulnerabilities which are present in the program code, which when they want to send it out. That is why you would see companies release what is called a beta first. They have, and then the actual version of the software is released, because the beta is given to developers and people who would want to see and test the software or that particular application to its brink point, which is breakpoint, and that would mean that they would discover vulnerabilities which then can be addressed before the final version of the software is released. So software releases happen in alpha version, then a beta version. First would be a developer version, then alpha version, then beta version, and then the final one comes out, because this is where the company actually gives it out to its set of developers, the people in the community, to be able to test it out in detail. Now, how do we know what are the typical mindset of hackers? Why do people look at hacking, and what is it that they get out of it? Now, hackers are individuals who are very expert, or they have a very technical expertise, and they want to generally look at testing things to their limit. They want to explore, they want to test things to the limit, they want to manipulate things, they want to get control of things, networks, software, systems, and they get a kick out of it because they feel that, okay, I've been able to break this, I've been able to do this, and this allows me to take this a step further. So their motives could be ethical, their motives could be unethical. Sometimes they are motivated by money-related transactions, and sometimes they could be just doing it for the sake of having fun. So understanding the psychology and the behavioral traits of hackers is sometimes done by organizations because they want to know why is it that people want to hack this, or why is it that people want to break into this, and what would they get out of it. So that the reason why we want to understand the mindset is we want to create mitigating strategies so that people, if I can understand that what is troubling you or what is not coming across to you in a good way, if I can understand that, then I can give you a solution for it as well. So that is why it is important for us to understand what is the mindset of hackers and why do they go about doing what they do, which is breaking in, looking at vulnerabilities, exploiting things, taking control of system networks and softwares, and their motives. If you understand, then you can actually look at um, devising things around it which would allow them to not do, let's say, harm which could be detrimental for operations, functions, accessibility, and even consumers. So one of the things that we want to look at is most hackers look at doing this for monetary gains. That means for money reasons. they are looking at basically hacking into to get hold of details, and obviously it is related to monetary aspect of it, and that is where they would want to look at taking on this particular aspect of hacking in particular. The second is, if you look at an example that I would give you, when Apple or when Samsung is very close to bringing out a new iPhone or a new Galaxy phone, there are lots of these videos and blogs and blog posts start to appear that this is the new feature in the phone which is coming. This is what is anticipated, and what people are looking at doing is they are very, very motivated or curious about how things are going to come out. And one of the things which starts at that point in time is that people start looking at increased activity of hacking, because they want to go into the company servers, company emails, discussions, forums to see what is actually coming out, curiosity. And that could be one of the reasons why people look at hacking. Now, in the corporate world, this could be termed as, I might do it as an individual person just to find out what is the new feature coming in iPhone 17, for example, right? I might do it out of curiosity. And my reasons of poking into a website, asking questions, following somebody, trailing somebody, or trolling somebody, and using programs to get hold of information is curiosity. But in the corporate world, this would be termed as espionage. Samsung would be very interested in knowing what Apple is working on. Apple would be very interested in knowing what Microsoft is working on. Microsoft would be very interested in knowing what, say, for example, NVIDIA is working on. And this particular part, which looks at getting hold of sensitive corporate information, but using hacking as a reasons to get hold of this confidential information, would be termed as what is called espionage. Espionage is a kind of a theft, a corporate theft. And this is where hackers get involved, because they get paid huge amount of money to get hold of that sensitive information from the company sources, databases, servers, and that would be one of the things that hackers look at doing. The other ways that they want to do this is they want to spam, right? They want to send out emails. Emails could be for marketing emails. They would be looking at sending out lots of these emails, which could be related to getting, say, click-throughs for digital advertising. Sometimes you get these emails, even if you unsubscribe them, you still continue to get emails. The unsubscription part of it does not happen. Now, why is this being done? Because they are trying to get hold of clicks and users driving traffic to the websites, and that could be used from the function, which is a function that we know as spamming. Then we talk about the taking control of a device. I remember when I was doing programming in 1990s, we were asked to develop a program in 1999, early 2000. I was asked to look at developing a program which would allow us to take control of somebody else's computer within a network. And I used to do programming on Visual C to be able to do that. So I used to write a code, which I used to send it on the email. The user would not know if the code is there, the file will execute, and that will allow me to remotely take control of the computer. Today, we see this being done for various many reasons. You have an application called LogMeIn. You have various applications which allow you to remotely take control of your computer, but you have to authorize it. And that is done to provide remote assistance and remote technical hardware, software related support. If I have a problem with my phone, I call up the Apple call centers. There will be somebody ringing me up from Ireland. They will send me a code. I will have to click yes on it, and then they will get access to my phone to see what is actually happening, and then they will be able to remotely diagnose it. But if this is done unethically and in an unauthorized way to get access to my device through the internet, then this would be a way of tricking me to take control of my device, and that would be another form of hacking which could happen, which is to take control of your device by executing a malicious program which you are not even aware of through your browser or through an application on your phone. Now, Apple iStore, or you look at the Android Play Store, they keep looking at taking out applications from the store because these applications have vulnerability in their code, which would mean that hackers could, if you have that application installed on your phone, that could give access of your phone and your sensitive data to hackers. So one of the things which these stores actually look at, and the companies actually look at very seriously, is to ensure that there are no vulnerabilities in software. And these vulnerabilities are basically codes which can be used to exploit and get a backdoor entry into the application. And through that application, they can get into your phone's operating system. So these are ways through which cyber attacks or cyber hackers actually look at, and that is their mindset because they want to get control of these sensitive information. Then sometimes you look at disruption. Now, disruption, I gave you an example already of this, was that hackers from North Korea essentially just wanted to disrupt and see if they can break the servers of the NHS. And in 2017-18, they basically created a DDoS attack, which is a distributed data attack, which disables the service. And they were successfully able to do it. And that allowed them to disable the National Health Service computer system. And their main aim was to look at no potential gains in terms of money or other things, but they just did it for the heck of doing it. In the sense they got a kick out of to see how good is our programming, how good is the group in terms of hacking activities, and can we break into these systems or not, because it was created by the government and was highlighted and advertised as the state-of-the-art system. But they were able to break into it. And the reason why they did this was by bombarding the system with unrequired or unwanted requests, which actually brought the whole server in the website down. And this is a way through which they disrupted the National Health Service for 2 or 3 days. And that meant a lot of patients and customers and the NHS in general faced that disruption. Vulnerability testing is what I mentioned earlier, is what is called ethical hacking. So a lot of software companies, when they create new code, new softwares, new applications, they invite people who can come in and do ethical hacking. It is to check any vulnerability or any sort of areas of gap in their code, and that would be done in order to ensure that when the final version is released to the market, it is something which is totally secure. And the last reason I can think of is they do it for fun. They test their knowledge, they want to test their skills, they want to test their programming skills. And sometimes you would see large number of bets happening in the dark internet to say, can you break into this website? Can you break into this particular server? Can you break into this particular platform? And it is done just for challenging and fun purposes. Those are the reasons that you would normally see why hackers would essentially look at hacking. What is the mindset of the hacker? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now, one or two last criteria that we want to quickly look at. One is, how do we outline different types of malware that exist? So first and foremost, you need to understand what is malware. Have you heard about the term malware?
Yes.
Okay. So malware is, in short, it used to be called malicious software. Something which is disease, something which is, not good. But it has over the years become a short word called malware. Malware essentially is a short for malicious software. And it's a program or a code which is designed to harm, exploit, gain unauthorized access to computer systems, network, or devices. That is what is a malware. It's a short code which will be executed in the background without you having to know about it. And that would, once executed as a code, as a program, would essentially provide access to your device network or your system to third party without you knowing it. And cyber criminals use this as a first step to get entry into the system, network, or a device. And this is predominantly done to steal data, disrupt, create disruptions, and also for some reasons in terms of espionage and spying. Sometimes you would see that on your PC, people can take control of your keyboard. They can take control of your camera. You would not know, and you're being spied on with your camera. Your keyboard is not acting, and you would say, okay, something has gone wrong. Something has got corrupted in my keyboard and my mouse is moving. But that is actually being used by people in the background, which are called hackers, by executing a malicious program or a malicious software. And what they are trying to then now do is get hold of your emails, your sensitive data, and your information to be able to use it for commercial benefits or reasons. Now, there are lots and lots of different types of malware, and they are classified into 6 types. You could classify them as what are called worms. Worms are essentially what are called software holes or vulnerabilities in the software, which means it's like a backdoor which has been left open. And people, if they understand that this is what the entry door is, they can get into your program, they can modify, delete files, they can execute programs, they can steal your data. But this is because the software itself has what are called problems in it. And this is basically called a worm. The second is what is called a virus. So viruses are typically, programs which will attach themselves to a legitimate program that you run on your PC or on your device. So if I ran Microsoft PowerPoint every day, what the hacker would do is understand that this is a software which runs every time. And every time you boot your PC, certain files will automatically get loaded while the PC is being booted. Because what is a virus? It's in the biological term, it's an animal or it's an animal which gets onto somebody's body as a host and get latches onto the host body and then travels with it. So in the PC context, what it'll be a program which latches onto another program and executes itself without you knowing about it. And that is one of the ways through which this can happen. Then you have what is called Trojan horses. Now, Trojan horses are essentially what are called, I would say, the reason I say Trojan horse, it has come from a story or a movie that we would have seen, which is a famous English movie, in which, the two kingdoms were fighting, and obviously they couldn't get entry into the fort, so they left a horse and they faked, a type that they've left the shores and they've left the city. So what the victors did was they brought the horse into the fort, and within the horse actually was a hidden some men which were from the cavalry were actually hidden, and they then opened the doors to the fort, and then the whole kingdom fell, and the whole kingdom fell essentially. So this is a very famous story, and a movie has been produced on this. Brad Pitt, acting in it, and the Trojan horse is a name which comes from in relation to something like that, because a Trojan is it disguises itself, a program which can disguise itself with the legitimate software, with the use of legitimate execution of a software, but has a malicious intent or has a negative intent in mind. I'm on the surface, I'm very good, but inside I have a feeling that I'm quite bad. So it's something like that. A Trojan horse is a program which disguises itself as a malicious software and then can give access to your system, device, or network to the hackers because it rides along with a genuine software that is being installed. You have bots and botnets. Essentially, these are programs which can be executed by a hacker onto your PC or your device, but they will come in and trick you that this is something that you need to do. Sometimes you would see you get an email. It says you have an invoice which has come in from somebody. Now, but you look at it in a bit more detail. You say, okay, how come? Hang on, I have not bought anything. How can an invoice come to me? And normally it is a zip file or some sort of a file that you click on, and when you click on it, it'll run as if the file is being unzipped. When you go and see the file is actually corrupted. What has happened in the background is a botnet or a program has executed itself by fooling you to say that this was something which you had purchased and there is an invoice attached for it. It will show up as a zip file, as a document. When you click on it, it runs a program in the background, but the intent here is to install a program to get access to your device or your PC. So there are other types of things like adware, which are basically unwanted advertisements that you get. Now, on my PC, I get about 50, 60 emails every day, which keep filling up my junk folder. And these are basically called adware, display unwanted advertisements, which essentially, when you click on, will redirect you to a number of different sites. And these are being done to basically get clicks on websites for the purposes of driving traffic and monetizing it. So they are basically called adware. You also have what is called ransomware. Now, ransomware is basically encrypted files which hackers get a hold of, and what they will do is then send these files to you on your email to collect ransom. That means they'll say, oh, I've got some sensitive photographs of you. And that is what happened in the hacking of the iCloud, Apple iCloud in 2012, 2013, when a lot of sensitive data and photographs of Hollywood celebrities got leaked into the dark web. So a lot of actresses and their sensitive material and data got leaked. And what they hackers then started to do was get hold of these photographs and email it to them saying that I'll publish it here, I'll publish it there until you pay me some ransom or money for in exchange for it. And that bit which is done by hackers when they claim money by sending across sensitive data to the user would be termed as what is called ransomware. So these are different types of attacks which hackers employ essentially for gaining access to the information. Okay. The last bit that we want to do is understand, different types of cyber attacks, which is quite important for us because this is going to help us understand what kind of cyber attacks actually happen. So I've listed them down here, in no particular order. Things like malware, phishing, I've already covered, but then we look at some of these which are called, man in the middle, MITM attack, DDoS, which is distributed denial of service attack, SQL injection, DNS tunneling, password attack, and obviously business email compromise attack. Let's look at the first one. Now, man in the middle attack is basically where an interest, why is it called man in the middle? Like I'm speaking, I'm using this software Zoom, and you on the other side are listening and receiving this communication, right? But if somebody in the middle interrupts this communication by getting access to the signal in the webinar, they might impose themselves onto this communication to say, or maybe for the fun reason or whatever they want to do, but they are getting into the middle of it to get access to it. And that is why the reason it is called man in the middle attack. That means when you are communicating, I think it used to happen a couple of years back. A simple example that I would give you is when we had the dial-up phones. If you call somebody, sometimes you had what are called mixed lines. You called somebody, but there's also somebody saying hello, hello in the middle. And that used to be because the phone lines used to get intertwined somewhere in the exchange or in the relay, and some other people could have got that call as well. So something very similar happens when we look at this happening online using, man in the middle attack, which is an attacker intercepts the communication of two parties in an attempt to spy or steal information. And that would be the man in the middle attack. Now, this tends to happen when you log into the website of a banking site, and it will straight away take you to a particular place and then redirect you to a banking site. You will not even realize. But what the hacker has done is installed a program on your browser, which takes you to a site which will capture, screen grab everything that you're doing on your banking site, and that will allow them to steal your data, and that is called espionage. And that typically is done through the way of man in the middle attack. Then you have the denial of service attack, which is distributed denial of service attack. This particular attack is an attack which is to overload the system, basically. Now, I'll give you a simple example is that when Apple releases a new software update, or when websites release a new product on their site, like an e-commerce site, you would generally see that the site has too many people trying to log in and get hold of that information or download that information. And as a result, what happens is we hear that the server has crashed. Now, why is that? Because there's a certain capacity which the servers, and when they do data balancing, they are able to allow a certain set or number of users to log into to get access to that information. If the server does not have enough requests that it can allocate to different users to serve that information, you would see the site actually starts to slow down. And at one point in time, it will stop responding. It will say 404 error, which is page not found, or it will say this, it will say server error. And that is because the site has been overloaded with the demand in terms of excessive traffic to the site. And excessive traffic makes it inaccessible for other users to get access to that site. And this error, when it happens, can be used by hackers to collect data, but it can also be used by them to disrupt a particular service. Imagine Apple launching a new MacBook or a new phone and their site goes down. How much loss of reputation customers would they have on that day when the site goes down? And that could be the reasons why hackers look at sending too many emails or too much traffic to the site, so that because of that excessive traffic, the servers are not able to handle the load and they crash. That means the software crashes. And this particular thing, when it is used in the form of what is called DDoS, which is a single computer system floods the target system with a number of requests that it is not able to let's say furnish or respond to, then what you are going to see is this is called a DDoS attack, which is a service denial or a disruption attack. Now, there are lots of different types of attacks which can happen under the DDoS, and this could also be disabling the server's database. Now, if I log into the bank has my details already on it, as an example. Because when I put my last name in, my banking number in, my account number and sort code, it straight away recognizes me, logs into the website, and it says, okay, welcome, Mr. Ramanjit Singh. Now, because it verifies the logging parameters and then it identifies that the customer is the same, it gives me a greeting. Now, when we look at hacking this server database where this information is stored, that would be called a SQL injection attack. That means the server itself will not be able to serve your information. You logged into the site, but it is showing nothing on your site or side on the browser. The site is blank. You log out again and then you try and log back in again, but again, it is not able to retrieve your information, even though you're trying to successfully log in. And that would be something which is called the SQL injection attack. That means the queries to the database where the information is stored are not being responded to. And why they are not being responded to? Because the hackers have actually done a DDoS attack. That means a denial of service attack, or they have overtaken and taken over the server, wherein they are actually getting all the details when you're logging in on a parallel screen, but you are able to see a blank screen. And that is where the SQL injection attack will happen. So hackers will look at stealing, modifying, or deleting information. They will be looking at bypassing authentication, and in some cases they'll be looking at disrupting the service. So these are different kind of attacks that you will generally see, which will be happening when we look at types of cyber attack. Now there is something called DNS tunneling. Now this is a very sophisticated attack which is done by hackers, and this is done predominantly to take away the traffic of one of the sites to divert the traffic to another site. Now you are trying to log into a site. Sometimes we see this, and I'll give you a simple example. As a company, we have lots of domain, right? If you type ukversity.com, it will redirect you to ukversity.co.uk, right? This is a way that we have installed a forwarder on the website. So we have lots of different websites, ukversity.org, ukversity.eu. But when you click on any of them and try and open it, they'll always take you to the ukversity.co.uk website. Similarly, in the DNS tunneling attack, what happens is the hackers would like to take over the network and divert the traffic to a different site or a different server altogether. And in such cases, they are trying to do this because they are trying to cause disruption of the business or of the transactions on that site. And this kind of an attack, which is done by taking over the network traffic, by looking at taking over the, let's say, the network of the customer, and then drive that traffic to a different site, would be termed as what is called the DNS tunneling, attack. The last one that we're looking at is business email compromise. Sometimes you have emails of certain individuals which are hacked, passwords are taken, and obviously because of which what can happen is somebody else is replying to your emails or sending out different kind of emails to different customers. And this has happened with me in the past as well. In 2014, when my email got hacked, what happened was the hackers were actually sending out emails, a lot of funny emails, jokes and pictures and different kind of things to all my contacts on my email. And this is done primarily for the purposes of asking for money. that I'm your friend and I'm in distress. I'm traveling to this country and I got stuck. My passport and everything is long. Can you wire me this money to this account because I urgently need it? So because it's an email come from you and somebody that you would probably be very tempted to do that. And in such cases, this kind of a compromise attack, which tends to happen, is called the business email compromise attack. Now, when we look at password attacks, they are pretty much common, and people try and crack your password, have a go at your password, guess your password, and the idea there is they want to get access to the information on your emails or certain types of data that you have on certain accounts, and that could be by brute force. That means they will keep. Sometimes what you will see is on the website when you go and log in, like your bank website, if you try and open your app on your phone and you get 5 attempts to it. If you put the passcode wrong, then your app gets blocked and your account gets blocked. You have to call up the bank and then you have to get it opened, right? Similarly, on the websites, if you see in Gmail, for example, you can log in 4 times, 5 times, but if you put your password wrong, then it'll say, okay, we need to verify that it is you who is trying to log in, right? Sometimes they give you a puzzle to say, can you see where the traffic lights are, where the buses are? Sometimes they will play a music, and that is a captcha or some sort of a key. They want to ensure that it's not the machine or it's not a program code which is trying to, log in and disable your account maliciously. So in such cases, you would generally see that these kind of brute force bots are used to crack your password and get access to your accounts. So these are ways in which, cyber attacks can happen. And what we've done is we've covered 6, 7 of them. There are lots and lots of others which have been also discovered, which are things like drive-by download act. Now, if you're trying to download a free book or free music, what it'll do is take you from one side to the other side to the other side to the other side, but you are not able to get that. But what it is trying to do is drive traffic to other sites. So it is basically taking you on a rigmarole to say, click here, you'll get this. It is ready for download, click here, but it is not going to give you the product or the service, but it is going to take you, which is called drive-by download attack. So these are the various types of things that we needed to cover in today's discussion with regards to the first learning outcome, which is to understand the use of cybersecurity, the types of attack, why it is done, the mindset of hackers, and obviously different types of software programs which can be used to get hold of your devices, networks, or information. Now, any questions on this so far?
Actually, no, but I have some question. It's regarding the AI.
Yes, go on.
Like sometimes, yeah, when sometimes they say that it hasn't happened to me, but I'm just asking, like I'm just curious to know. They can fake your sound and they can call someone and like ask them for money or ask them for something. One of your loved ones, of your contacts, of your anyone. So what is the called?
So cloning of voice, cloning can essentially happen today because this is related to generation of your voice and your image through the use of certain types of software which allows you to create clones. And this is now being used under AI, for various good reasons. For example, within call center softwares or within the EPBX or the operating side of things, when you dial in a particular number, there are lots of options which companies can take you through before they put you onto an operator. And this is the use of AI to essentially help guide consumers. I'll put it this way, to the right set of, let's say, customer services on their side, to the right set of customer services to help solve the problem. So AI has lots of different ways in which it can be implemented. One such way, which you have asked as a question, is that can AI be used? Yes, it is being used. What it can be used for? It is being used to basically do away with, uh, let's say, I want to use the right word, which is it is being used in this context to basically do away with repetitive part of the transaction. So it is
Yeah.
helping consumers get onto, say, for example, the right option in the shortest possible point in time. Say, for example, if it is done for a telephone. So on telephone, sometimes you ring up your mobile phone company and you would say, okay, dial 1 for new product, dial 2 for broadband, dial 3 for this, dial 4 for support, dial 5 for accounts. So it is being used to create productivity and efficiency by implementing the use of AI to allow systems to provide options, and those options could be automated at their end. But in some cases, you would see that it can also be used in an unauthorized way to clone
Yeah.
somebody's voice and then use it for, malicious transactions. Sometimes you pick up the phone nowadays, and what happens is you say hello again, and then a voice, by the time it picks it up, it's you hello, and it says hello.
The
Can I
user
speak
fee.
to this? You hang up the phone. This is because there's a bit of a delay in terms of the software being able to run, I think. But in some cases, what they want to do is they want to automate this process of dialing, the cold calling that they are doing through telephone. They want to speak to basic part of the customer saying that, hello, you're being called today from the HMRC, and we are looking at doing this particular survey. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and you're going to respond, and it'll take 2 minutes of your time. And you'll say, okay, let's go ahead. Then it'll quickly search in its database. When the customer responds, okay, what is the response? The response will come. But this is obviously can be misused, in short. But yes, there are
Yeah.
applications like this which are coming, which is called the automated dialer, automated prompt, which are coming in, where companies who rely more on telephone marketing are using it predominantly to automate calling, rather than have agents in the call center sitting and call.
Yeah.
Is it
I
okay?
see. Yeah, I just wanted to know, like, I'm curious about some questions and regarding the AI. I wanted to know whether the AI can replace programmers, or like, how can it help programming, coding, and those related stuff to programming and coding.
Okay, so this part of the question is interesting. I would suggest that you note it down and you go to YouTube and do a search of for a video, which will come up quite quickly, which will say what are the professions which AI programming or AI is going to replace in the next 10 years. So there's a very good video which will come up. And in that video, what somebody has drawn this video up, and they said, okay, with AI now becoming so useful, there are certain professions which will actually disappear. And
Yeah.
programming is one of them. Right, so AI is able to do programming in Python, it is able to do programming in SQL, and there are different codes being created right now. And to a certain extent, that programming is 100% possible with the use of AI.
Yeah, but I always say it's important to know, like, the programming language, to be aware of things, even if the AI takes our place or anything, you should be aware of what's happening around you. So that's why I consider IT the important subject to study.
Yeah, that's correct. I think people would there's another course that we have, which is, Diploma in Artificial Intelligence, which will take you into language learning models. It'll take you into Python and programming, which is required primarily to understand how prompting can be done and how programs can be created to write what AI is essentially doing, or create prompts and short programs, which then can be used to use and create further programs. And that is under the language learning models and use of programming languages like Python. But that's at level 7. Essentially, a lot of people are interested in doing it, but a lot of them are interested in being the end customer and the end user of it, rather than designing and developing that side of the code. So there are obviously programmers writing this thing for AI to work on, for the AI to collect information. When you look at ChatGPT, obviously it's a program which has been created by programmers, but that AI or that program which has been created is now self-learning. And what Elon Musk is saying, if I read in the news day before yesterday, he said AI is going to become smarter than humans by 2030. So this is where it is learning quite quickly things that you would want to program and you would want to do. But programming is one such profession which obviously AI will pretty much take over in the coming years. I have written a
Yeah.
lot of programs on Java, on Python, using ChatGPT, and you give it a command and say, okay, I want to create a program, I want to create a calculator, and could you tell me the program, could you write me the program for creating a calculator using Java? It'll give you the code pretty much straight away.
Yeah, I see.
So what I'll do is
We
I will end this session today so that we are able to catch up in the next one to discuss learning outcome 2. It's been a bit of a long session because we had a bit of a unit introduction as well. But I think I'm going to try and end this session here so that we can then catch up, for learning outcome 2 in the next one.
Yeah, okay. Regarding learning outcome 1, like
Yes.
I will start working on the assignment regarding these for this part of the assignment. Can I use the ChatGPT, like not copy paste, but like to get the idea out of it? Is that acceptable?
See, for the purposes of research, you can use ChatGPT or any such AI program, not a problem, because obviously
Yeah,
information is available at hand quite quickly. But
yeah,
I would suggest that in order, obviously, it will bring out information because of the model which is now available 2024. But I would suggest that if you want to look at reading a bit more, go on to the 2 books that we've uploaded and 1 or 2 articles which are given. They would give you more
yeah.
concise information which is up on Moodle because that
Okay.
is related to your course content. Obviously,
Yeah,
ChatGPT will also pull out information from different sources, but it is going to be a bit more concise part of it if you go about and do read, the book which has been uploaded, on Moodle, and that is what you would see. For example, this is the book that I've opened up, and it talks about things like introduction, challenges to cyber world. So chapter 1 essentially is what we've covered to a certain extent with, chapter 2 up until
yeah,
chapter 2, and that will give you a lot of detailed knowledge of what we've covered today, using the slides.
yeah. So what we have covered is mentioned in
This is chapter
chapter
1 and
1.
chapter 2.
Chapter 1 and chapter 2. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
good stuff. So thanks for joining in, and I will see you in the next one.
Okay. Thank you,
Take
Mr.
care. Bye.